Hello everyone, good evening. Can you please check like if I am audible or not? And one, please respond to my live stream. Hello, someone can respond like if I am audible and hello, is there any mic problem? My mic is not working or what? Uh, Let me check just a second. We'll start the session for today. Uh, just a few minutes. Okay, so I think like everything is fine right now. So I'll begin the session. So I hope in my last session you have started your preparation for GATE and have gone through some of the topics like what we have to study in DBMS and gone through some of the syllabus what are present for GATE. So today we'll start the very first and very basic thing of DBMS subject that is as the topic says ER model. So hi everyone, I am Rohan Jaiswal. Today we'll begin with ER diagrams and attributes. So moving on. So let's start the session. So the agenda of today's session is like we'll basically start with what is the ER diagram and what are some of the basics related to ER diagrams, or we can sometimes say ER models. And then we'll gradually move to entity, like what are entities and what are entity sets, what is the difference. I know many of the aspirants has confusion regarding what are entities and entity sets. These seems very trivial topics, but I must say these things must be very much clear before appearing for any competitive exam. So in this session, we'll clear all the ambiguity regarding what are entity sets, and then moving on to like what are the types of entities we have. There are some types of like we call it weak entities and strong entity sets, and why we use it, why they are called weak entities and strong entities. Then gradually we'll move to what are attributes, and what are the type of attributes, why attributes are used, where uh, it is used, what are their applications and all. Then concluding the sessions, we'll solve some of the gate problems and some of the conceptual problems regarding the ER model and ER diagrams. Okay, so I hope everyone is ready, and let's start the thing. So ER model, as a topic suggests, what is ER model? So ER model stands for entity relationship model, and sometimes it's also called entity relationship diagram. So many of the students have confusion like why we study ER model and why it is used in a DBMS. So entity models, as it says, like it is nothing but a high level database design. So as we all know, before designing a database structure, we first do some diagrammatic representation or the conceptual design of our database, so that in case we make any database structure, before making it, we actually have like what are the what is the, I mean, what is the items, what are the conceptual design, so that we can finally store data and manage data in the database files. So it's just like a blueprint of the database structure, right? So as we all know, like before constructing a building or anything, we first make a blueprint of that building, isn't it? So similarly, like if we take another example, like before constructing a car or manufacturing a car, we first have our blueprints, like where the seats will be present, where the wiper and where the bonnet will be present, like where the engine will be present. So similarly, in building also, like before constructing the whole building, we basically uh, make like what are the number of rooms will be there, and what are the, like where it will be present, what is the conceptual design of that building before actually building constructing the main building, right? So yeah, likewise here we all have ER models for database design. Okay, so before building the actual database structure, before that we make ER model so that we can get like what are the things we are going to use in that database structure, and how the database like will look like in the end. So as it says, like it's a high level database design. Also in the next line it says like it is a conceptual data design of a database, right? So what do you mean by conceptual design of a database? It's basically, it's not something where we store anything, or it's like we don't store any design, but yeah, it gives a conceptual idea about like how the database will look like. And it is very simple and easy to design and to view the like what like to view the data which will be using to store into the database structure, right? So it's very easy and simple. And what is like how we make our ER models? So ER models are consist of diagrams to picturize the DB structure. Okay, so diagrams, like we use some shapes and structures like rectangle, oval, and dashed oval, dashed rectangles, and diamond shape, or we can sometimes call it kite shapes, something like that, to represent the ER model. And it is not very free from ambiguity. Ambiguity means like it's free from any confusion. Like it's not very doesn't require very much technical knowledge to understand what is ER diagram, right? So let's go ahead. So this is an example of entity. Like if we call like a student entity, student, as we all can see, like here the rectangle is used to define a student, and a name, an oval is used to define a name, what its student's name, and DOB, an oval is used to define date of birth of that student, and oval is used to define like address of that student, and then again an oval is used to represent the roll number of that student. Okay, so and we all can like here observe one thing, there is an underline below the roll number, right? So what are all these things? what is this box, and what are the oval, what it just represent. We all will see. This is just an example to showcase like how an entity relationship diagram look like, right? It's a single entity. It doesn't have any relationship with any other entity right now. Just it is a single entity to represent. It's just a uh, basic model, right? So let's start. What is entity, and what are entity sets? These are the terminology we are talking about. As the statement says, like what is entity? Entity is nothing but it can be an object with a physical existence, right? Like it must be an object, a particular. It can be like a particular person. It can be a car. It can be a house. It can be an employee, or it may be an object with conceptual existence, or like a company or a job or a university course which can be uniquely distinguished. I would like to highlight like the entity should be uniquely distinguished from all other. As from the definition we see, like it is an object with either a physical existence or it's just a conceptual existence, right? A physical existence mean a human, a car which we can physically touch, physically see, physically feel, right? And it's a conceptual existence like a job. A job is a conceptual thing, right? It's not a physical thing. A university course, like a course, we say we cannot. It doesn't have a physical existence, right? It only has a conceptual existence. So what is an entity? An entity is nothing but an object, right, from which we can which can be easily uniquely distinguished from all other objects, right? Like suppose if we have suppose suppose if we have three notebooks. Let's suppose if we have three notebooks. Okay, so here I have drawn three notebooks. Let's suppose the drawing is quite bad, I know, but let's suppose we have three notebooks of same brand, same size, and everything is same thickness, same height, and everything is same about all these three notebooks. Okay, so can we distinguish any one particular notebook from any from others? Everyone will say like as everything is like same everything in between them, we cannot distinguish them. So is it an entity right now? No, we cannot say like it is an entity right now because it cannot be uniquely distinguished among rest. Okay, so it's not an entity yet. But like if we take another example, like suppose we have a notebook of different sizes. Suppose this notebook is small. Suppose this notebook is medium and this notebook is large. So can we say like if can we say like we can distinguish between them? Yes, definitely we can differentiate between them, right? Because one is small, another is medium size, and the last one is large size. So if I say like pass me the medium notebook, can you pass it to me? Yes, of course you can pass it to me right now. This is the medium one. Like you will identify like, oh yeah, this is the medium one. I have to pass this. So among these three notebooks, we can pass like we can distinguish what are the what is the main difference between them, right? So these these three notebooks are entities right now. But here, these three notebooks are not entities. These are just an object because we cannot distinguish between them. But here it becomes an entity. So I hope right now uh, we know what is entity. So moving on to the entity set, like what is an entity set? So from the terminology or only we get like it is a set of entities, but it is not just a set of entities, but we can say like it is a set of same type of entities, right? It is a set of same type of entities. So as here in the diagram the all those threes are notebooks, right? So every notebook has similar properties, like the it will have property like thickness, it will have property like brand, it will have properties like number of pages, right? Uske baad it will have property like the type of binding it has, the type of cover it has, right? But all this property, every three notebook will have this property, right? So they share a similar properties as it is written here. They share similar property. So we can say like all these three notebooks are belong to a particular entity set. Okay, so this is an entity set. So from the diagram given here, student is an entity which is under a rectangle, and the this oval which consists of S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. This is an entity set or consisting of a student, right? So I hope you are clear with what is entity and entity set. I'll repeat like what is an entity. Entity is an object which can be of physical existence or which can be of conceptual existence, but it should be uniquely distinguished among each other. If I say like please give me this book, then this book must have some uniquely identified features so that it can be distinguished from any other book or notebook, whatever it is. Okay, and entity set is the set of all those similar kind of entities which share similar properties. As I mentioned, like the notebook will have similar properties like the number of pages, the brand, and what is the size, just like that. Okay, then moving to next topic, like as I was talking about, like what are the entities, what are the types of entities, right? So uh, the first one is strong entity. So, what is a strong entity? Strong entity, as it is written, like it is not dependent on any other entity in the schema, right? Because as it says, strong entity is something which does not depend any on any other entity, right? But I mean, it's a independent entity. It does not depend any other upon any other entity. If you don't understand it, it will become clear as we move on to weak entity, then we'll differentiate between both of them. Then you will get a better idea about what is strong entity and weak entity. So just follow me, like what is strong entity. Strong entity will always have a primary key, right? This should be highlighted, like strong entity must have an primary key. If a entity has primary key, so it is, we can say like it is a strong entity. For now, if you don't know like what is primary key, I can say like primary key is something which helps you distinguish between different among entities. Okay, like just I said, like a brand of that notebook. So brand of that notebook, suppose if we have notebook of three different brands, like suppose ABC. Okay, so A is something, A is one brand which is helping us to differentiate between B and C. So we can say A is the primary key which helps me to differentiate that notebook from other two, right? So a strong entity will have a primary key. And next, strong entities are represented by a single rectangle. Okay, as it is shown in the here in the diagram, strong entity is represented by a single rectangle. Previously, as I've shown you, the student also has had uh, a rectangle, a single border rectangle, right? Because a student can be distinguished by their roll numbers, right? Because every student has a different roll number. So if we say like roll number can act as primary key for a particular student, because it helps it to distinguish a particular student from others, right? So the relationship of two different entity is represented by a single diagram. Now this lines will say like the relationship for the time being, let's say like really what is relationship and all. uh, for the time being, let's just get a brief idea like what is relationship is nothing but it is a relationship between two or more entities. Okay, so suppose if there is a student entity, and there is some course, right? Let's suppose there is some course. So to relate between them, we have some relationship. This is a relationship between these, which represent which student has enrolled in which course, right? So this is a single diamond as I have drawn. This is a single diamond, right? So the relationship shows what is the relationship between two or more entities, and various strong entities when combined together create a strong entity set. Like this is a strong entity. This is a strong entity, so this all combined is known as strong entity set. Okay. So strong entity set may not have total participation. So what is participation right now? You guys must have be wondering what is participation. So participation is something, just for the time being. Let's say participation is nothing if every student in this entity in this participates or enroll in any course, then we say like the student has uh, total participation. If any of the student does not take a course, or like we can say like another way, like if any of the student is not related to any course, if a single student only not related to the any course, then we say like it has partial participation, not total participation. Okay. Once again I'll repeat, like if all the student has participated in course or has enrolled in a course, then it's called a total participation. And if uh, a single student has not participated, like if uh, then it's called partial participation, right? So then coming to weak entity, what is weak entity? As the first line says, a weak entity is can be represented with a double rectangle or a rectangle with double border. So here it is the representation. So the next line says it does not have a key attribute, right? So weak entity does not have a key attribute, or like weak entity does not have its primary key. So we can say like we cannot distinguish it from other entity or from other objects. Then you will say like if we cannot distinguish it, then how it is an entity, right? You must be wondering like if it does not have primary key, then how we can distinguish it from other objects, right? So what is the thing behind it? What is the logic? Is weak entity set depends upon the strong entity set to distinguish itself. Okay, as it is written, the attributes of weak entity sets are not sufficient to uniquely identify entities. Okay, so as the weak entity set do not have any primary key, they cannot be identified on their own. And the weak entity set has total participation in its identifying relationship with owner's identity. Owners here Owner identity is a strong entity set. Okay. So we can overall say like what is weak entity set? Weak entity set is nothing but the existence of weak entity set depends upon the strong entity set. If there is no strong entities entity associated with weak entity, then the existent does not exist. Okay. So if strong entity exists, then only weak entity exists. Otherwise, it does not exist. For example, if we can take like for a person, okay, suppose person is an entity. Person is an entity, so it will have a weak entity side like card number Aadhaar card number. Okay, so we all know like if person exists, then only his or her Aadhaar card will exist, right? So yeah, so we all know the existence of this Aadhaar card number depends on this person, because if the person exists, then only his or her Aadhaar card number will exist. But if there is an Aadhaar card number, there may not may not be any person related to a particular Aadhaar number, right? So are you getting it? Like if there is a person, then only an Aadhaar card will be there. If there is a car, then only there can be a number plate or the car number associated with it, because like you cannot have a car number without a car, right? So the car number or Aadhaar number is the weak entity set, or we can say like is a weak entity, and the person is a strong entity. And this Aadhaar number weak entity depends upon the person to exist itself, right? And here we can see like here we use a single line, but here we use a double line, because the weak entity set is related. The weak entity set has total participation, as it is written here. This is very important line to note. Like the weak entity have total participation in its identifying relationship with owner's identity. Okay, so the total participation is represented by double lines. What does it mean? Like it means that every Aadhaar number or every entry in the Aadhaar number is associated with at least one person, right? As I said, like there can be no Aadhaar card number without a person. So every Aadhaar card number will be related to a particular person only. Okay, and the relationship between them is represented by a double diamond with a double border. Okay, and the primary key of this Aadhaar, I mean the weak entity, totally depends upon the primary key of this strong entity person, right? So let's move on. So as I have shown you behind, like what is weak entity and what is strong entity, this diagram shows the relationship. What is weak and relationship set? The relationship which relates weak entity sets is called weak relationship set. Okay, so it is represented by diamond with double border, as it is written here. So you can see like a customer borrows a loan and there is total participation, because there cannot exist a loan without a customer, right? So every entry in the loan and in the loan will be related to a customer, right? Because so every but a customer can have multiple number of loans, right? And these what are these ovals? These are attributes. We'll cover what is this oval and what is this L name, L date. We'll cover these later in the session. So for now, the borrow is a weak relationship set. This loan is weak entity, and this customer is strong entity, and it is represented by a single border rectangle, and this weak entity is represented by a double border rectangle. Okay, and here it is a strong participation, sorry, total participation, which means every loan is has relation with any customer, but here it is a partial participation, because in a bank every customer does not take loan, right? Some of the customer may have taken or borrowed loan or something, but every customer has not borrowed loan. Okay, so here it is, the single line represent a partial participation, which means every customer is not related with this loan entity, right? So let's go ahead. So yeah, here it comes attributes. What are attributes? So what are attributes? As the statement says, attributes are the property which define the entity set. Okay, so what are the properties? So if I ask you like what can be the properties of a student, so as this diagram represents, student can have a roll number, right? It can have a name, it can have an address, it can have a date of birth, right? So these are nothing, these are the properties which define the student entity. Okay, or technically we call it attributes. Okay, so example, roll number, name, address, DOV are the attributes which defines the entity type student. Okay, in an ER diagram. So here these attributes are represented by oval. Okay, so I think you have got it. What are attributes? And here we can see like in except this roll number, none of the attribute has underline in it, but the roll number has underline in it. Okay. So why there is an underline? Because this roll number helps me to uniquely identify each student, right? Like if I say like go and call roll number 2 from class 9. So you will quickly identify, oh yes, this is the roll number 2. So I am calling roll number 2 only. Okay. Like, but if I say you like uh, call Sham from class 9, so there can be more than one Sham in 9 in the class 9. Okay. So you won't be able to uniquely which Sham I am calling. So this name cannot help me to uniquely identify Sham. So this roll number helps me to uniquely identify Sham. So this is we call a primary key, or we can say like key to for right now we can say key to identify a particular student, as I here mentioned Sham. So if I say like call roll number 2, you will automatically know like, oh, Sham is has been called, right? So now we'll see like what are the types of attributes and what are the types of attributes and why they are used. So the very basic type of attribute is simple attribute. So simple attribute which cannot be further subdivided into components. It is represented by an oval. Okay. As it here says, like it cannot be further subdivided. So like the age, if I take age of a student, can we divide it further? No, right? But if I ask you like name of a student, can it be divided for? Next is composite attribute. As I've said, like uh, contrary to the simple attribute, composite attributes are attributes which can be decomposed into more than like one or more attributes further. Like if we take an address attribute can be further subdivided into street, into city, into a state, into a country. Okay. Or sometimes like we can say like an email. If we say email is an attribute of a student, right? It can to username and further domain, right? So email can be a composite attribute because it can be further divided into one or more attributes. So email and addresses are called composite attributes. So how it is represented? It is represented by ovals comprising of ovals, right? This is ovals comprising of other ovals. Okay. So moving on. So what are multi-valued attributes? So from the name only, we can get an idea like the attributes which can have multiple values, right? So an attribute which consists of more than one value for a given entity. So for an example, we can take a student, say like for an example, we can say like a student can have more than one phone number. We can have more than one phone number, right? We all have so phone number is the multi-valued attribute is represented by double oval. Okay. So why I am like focusing on the representation of all this, because there was a question in 20 gate 2020 only about the representation of all this. Okay, so that's why I have highlighted this in every type of attribute. So it's important to remember. Sometimes it can be asked. Okay, so what is multi-valued attribute? Multi-valued attributes are the attributes which can have multiple values at a time. Okay, so phone number can be one of them, which and it is represented by double over. Okay, so email address can be multi-valued attribute because one can have more than one email. So we can say like email is also a multi-valued attribute. Okay, so you will say right, will say like email was composite attribute, then how it can be a multi-valued attribute. Then let me mention like these divisions of attributes, like these types of attributes are not disjoint. I mean, one attribute can come under two or more section of attribute. Like one attribute can be a multi-valued attribute. It doesn't mean it cannot be any other type of attribute. Okay. If an attribute is comes under one type of attribute, it can come under another type of attribute also. Okay. So email can be a multi-valued attribute, and email can be a composite attribute. Okay. So the next type of attribute we have are the derived attributes. So what are derived attributes? Derived attributes are the attributes, I mean, which can be derived from a particular attribute. I mean, if a student has, if a student entity has DOB as one of its attribute, then from this DOB we can get another attribute, which is age. Okay, we from this DOB we can derive this age, isn't it? Like if we know the date of birth of a particular student, we can derive like, or we can estimate like what can be the age of that student at that point of time, right? And this derived attribute changes from time to time. Okay, so it is not constant, but the DOB is constant, right? Every student will have a fixed date of birth, but the age of that student depends upon the time at which the person has asked about his age, right? So we can derive this age by the considering the current date minus the date of birth. We can get like what is the date age of that student. So age is nothing but age is a derived attribute. Okay, so the attribute which keeps on changing from time to time, or which is used like which depends, or we can say like which can be calculated from a particular attribute, is called a derived attribute. So age is a derived attribute which is calculated from the attribute DOB. Okay, how it is represented? It is represented by a dashed oval. Okay, so let's go ahead. So this is the complete picture. It shows like entity and its attributes and what different types of attributes. So here I think it is clear to you. Like if I ask you what are the simple attributes here, so you will say like roll number, name, date of birth, and country, state, city, street. Streets are all simple attribute, right? What is the entity here? Student is the entity, right? What is the derived attribute here? Derived attribute is the age. Age is a derived attribute. Okay. What is a composite attribute? Composite attribute address, right? Address is a composite attribute because address can be further divided into country, state, city, street. Okay. So multi-valued attribute, phone number can be the multi-valued attribute. Okay. So this is a complete picture. I hope everything is clear up to right now. Okay, so moving on. So I'd like to ask you like questions regarding what I have taught you today. Like the question says, an entity which does not have sufficient attributes to form a primary key is called a strong entity set or a weak entity set or both or none. Okay, so from what I taught previously, what I talked about, the entity which does not have sufficient attributes to form a primary key. So it is a weak entity set, right? Because strong entity set has primary key or the sufficient attributes to distinguish itself. Okay, so the answer is B, weak entity. So moving to the next question, weak entity will set will always have. So weak entity set will always have either partial participation or total participation or no participation, or it can have anyone. So weak entities will have partial participation or total participation or no participation. So it will have a total participation, right? So weak entities will have total participation. As I talked earlier, like weak entity set, like no Aadhaar card number can exist without a person, right? So weak entity, but a person can be present without an Aadhaar card. Suppose an infant at the time of birth, it doesn't has Aadhaar card, right? So there can be a person which does not have Aadhaar card yet. So there, it strong entity set has this is a single border. Okay, this is not a double border. This is a single border, and this is a weak entity set. Aadhaar card number. It has double. Okay, so it has total participation, as you can see here. This has total participation. So coming to the next question. So this question was asked in Computer Science GATE 2020. This is a very recent question. Only last year only it was asked. Like, and let me tell you, like this was the question many of the students have marked wrong, maybe due to rush or something, due to lack of attentivity. They have marked wrong. So GATE also test your attentiveness, like and the state of your mind. So please, this was very easy question. So please don't rush and first understand the question, what is being asked here, then only answer. Okay, so due to rush, you lose these marks. Okay, so please avoid rush during the exam. So the question says like which one of the following is used to represent the supporting many one relationship of a weak entity set in an entity relationship diagram. Okay, so as I have shown you, like that, it's asking about the shape of the relationship of a weak entity set. Okay, as I have shown you, the shape of the weak relationship is a diamond with double border, right? Where it has the total participation, and here it is. It can be single, it can be total. Okay, I mean it can be partial or it can be total in the strong entity. So this is the thing which is asked here, like the relation, how it is represented. So the answer for this question is the diamond with double border, right? So this is the answer, diamond with double border. Again, which of the following is used to represent the supporting many-one relationship of a weak entity set in a relationship entity relationship diagram, right? So the answer for this question is diamond with double bold border. This is the thing. Okay. Many of the student has marked B, thinking like the question has asked the diagram of the weak entity, because the weak entity is represented by the rectangles with double border, right? So many of the student has marked B, but the actual answer, the what the question has asked, the diagram of relationship, not the entity. So the diagram of the relationship is diamond with double border, right? So the answer will be A, diamond with double border. So the last question. So here is the last question, like what is derived attribute, like derived attribute in ER diagram is represented as. So it's also a very basic, a oval with solid border, oval with dash border, oval with double border, or none. So this is oval with dash border, right? So B is the answer, I guess. So oval with double dash border, right? So here is the answer. So concluding the session, what are all the things which we learned today? What's the summary? Like today we learned more about what is ER model, why we learn it, what is the idea, why we use it. It gives a conceptual level data model diagram, like how the database structure will be formed. So it's a blueprint of the database structure. It's not very technical. It's very much like easy to understand. It's free of ambiguity, and it is used to display relationship between two or more entities. Okay, so entity can be a person, a place, an object, or a physical object of physical or conceptual existence. Okay, which can be uniquely identified. Okay, and weak entities does not have its key attribute, which means it cannot be differentiated among others. Okay, so this was the thing. So thank you, everyone. I hope you all guys enjoyed the session a lot. Or these are just the basic topics. This is just the starting. Gradually, we'll deep down more into the concepts and we'll solve more number of questions so that we can solve gate questions easily. Slowly, we'll understand like every concepts. For now, I'm taking it a bit in a slow pace so that you can get enough time to read and to get the concepts, to search and to get a better idea, and gradually we'll increase the pace and increase the depth of the topic so that we'll be able to solve the gate questions as easily as possible. Okay, thank you everyone for the session. Thanks a lot.